Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Not Another Nutrition Podcast. And the very aptly named Not Another Nutrition Podcast. I'm very proud of the name, mainly because it does a couple of things. One, it really describes what it's going to be about, which is not just nutrition. It's not just another nutrition-focused, fitness-focused podcast. I want to talk about a number of different areas on this podcast that I will go into in just a second. And secondly, it does that thing of not another nutrition podcast, which is how I've felt every time I've seen, podcast after podcast coming out. Not throwing any shade on people, just it seems like every man and his dog has one. Now I've got one. And I just thought to myself, what do I have to add to that sphere that isn't already there? And I've got some notes here that I'm going to go through. And this is just an introductory episode, really. And I won't always have notes for what I record. But today there was just a few things I really wanted to cover. So I'm going to talk to you about what Not Another Nutrition Podcast is and what I would like it to be and what I would like it to become. Then secondly, how you can use it. And there are some intricacies within that I will talk to you about. And then finally, as it's the first one, I don't know if you're a long-time follower, a brand new follower, just found this podcast recommended by a friend. Just talk to you quickly about who I am and what I have done leading me up to today. But just firstly, for those of you who are kind of longer time friends, followers, fans, whatever you identify as, I guess some people are asking, why now? Why a podcast now? Some of you may know that I had a podcast. I didn't fully fact check this, but it's I wrote down 2012 to 2015 roughly, for about 3 years. So I had a podcast way back when, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it probably bolstered some of the stuff to where I am today. And for various reasons, I didn't continue that. Some of it was just a time management thing. It took up a lot of time. I talk a lot. I had a co-host. My co-host was Mike Sweeney, who was a registered dietitian. And it was a great dynamic. And we had all these nice reviews of people saying, this is true infotainment, which I really identify with regards to all of my teaching, trying to bring a level of entertainment within the, as well as the information that it brings. But realistically, there's no real purpose to this podcast other than the fact that I like to talk, I like to teach, and I'm a thinker, not just about nutrition. One of the greatest compliments I've ever been given was being called a thought leader in the world of nutrition. And I do like to think deeply about some of the concepts within nutrition and suggest alternative ways of viewing things and alternative ways of working with clients whilst remaining evidence-based. That's going to be a core concept of the podcast. But then also moving into other things that I just like discussing. Parenting is one. I joked recently on my social media about potentially facilitating a little parenting course. Not that I'm an expert on parenting, but it's something that I have experience in. It's something I think I've done quite well, and something that I have made mistakes and learned from and changed my thinking dramatically on through doing parenting courses. Or a parenting course, sorry. So I want to talk about that because someone, who loves their children so much, who has played such a large role in their life, who takes such an interest in my children's life, I have realized that I've started to influence people on things. People who even haven't got kids, maybe are planning for kids. People who have got kids but are struggling, and then some of the stuff I've spoken about has helped them. I really enjoy it. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. But also, I kind of think of myself as a bit of a junior philosopher, in that there are obviously these great philosophers over the ages, and I'm just someone who takes an interest in it. I'm a learner of that, and I like the philosophy of life. And so just being able to have a platform where I can talk about some of those things and spread or encourage deeper thinking on topics. I like to do that. I like to do that in my friendship circles. I like to do that with my staff. And so being able to talk about that will be something that I will enjoy, some kind of catharsis within that, and hopefully inspire or motivate, or just help others to think deeper on some subjects. Never giving the right answers, but always kind of giving a way of looking at certain things. So I've kind of gone into this point of what Not Another Nutrition Podcast is. In fact, just taking a step back. Why now? Partly because being able to just talk and ramble and just pick up my phone with a microphone and record you something that's audibly nice to listen to, not just like really echoey sound, but I won't be doing this always in a studio-esque format. I will also sometimes, if I deliver a lecture somewhere and I have access to that content and I think there's a really great segment within there, I will just strip the audio off that and put it as an episode on iTunes or Spotify or wherever. And those of you watching stuff on YouTube and maybe Spotify and Instagram TV, hopefully being able to bring that to you there. So what Not Another Nutrition Podcast is, I've written down these topics and I want to do it well. I'm one of those people, one of my philosophies that I try to stick to is, if you're going to do something, do it well. And also having some kind of unique thing. Again, I want to add to this space. And so one of the things I'm going to bring to that is just well-formatted titles of episodes, and so that you can navigate the information. So if it is a parenting episode, it will say, hashtag 15, episode 15, number 15, parenting, and then the title. So that if you are someone who particularly follows me for a certain type of information, nutrition, parenting, business, careers, self-improvement, I will put those are the kind of the first 5 that I have come up with, that you will be able to see which episodes specifically relate to those. So the business and careers aspect, I do not believe that I'm a business expert, but I have been successful in running multiple businesses in one particular space. And I've made mistakes and I have had great successes. And so I have also mentored, nearing thousands of other professionals. And so through that, being a deep thinker with all these things, being a generally reflective person and remembering stuff, and someone who's very interested in the economic side of things, the finance side of things, the marketing side of things, I really, really enjoy these things outside of nutrition. And, I taught myself most, growing a business kind of single-handedly, and not being, making the mistake of not delegating out or getting consultants, etc. in and doing it all myself. It's a mistake, but also a blessing, because I was so interested in those things. So where business and careers collide, and on top of that, not just business of running a business, but there will be, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet, but for those of you who are nutrition, health, fitness professionals, sometimes I will talk about being a practitioner. Some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about on LinkedIn, some of the stuff that I talk about inside our Mac-Nutrition Mentoring Lab, which I'll talk to you about in very, very briefly in a minute. And then the self-improvement side of things. That's something that I'm probably most excited about. And actually, having only just recording right now, my first ever episode, I've already got about 4 or 5 already recorded episodes that I would call self-improvement. So I need to get some nutrition ones on the go too. And, one of them is actually parenting, nutrition, and self-improvement-esque content all in one. Self-improvement is not the best title, but I'm struggling to come up with anything better. So feel free to shoot me something if you think of something. But it'll contain, things on confidence, self-esteem, presentation skills, mental health, all things I like to talk about, have thought a lot about, have experience with, and so it's just an avenue to discuss those things. So moving on to kind of how you can use the podcast. As I've said, there will be video of most episodes. I plan to do, no matter where I am, at least have some sort of video. Some of them I will do my very best to have captions, subtitles, captions, closed captions on them. Words on the screen that you can read if you do not have the video on. So on YouTube, Instagram TV, and maybe Spotify. I haven't got that far yet with understanding how that works. But obviously the audio versions on iTunes and Spotify and other kind of Android-based apps, Stitcher, etc. Anything that you use desperately, SoundCloud, that's another one that we'll definitely be doing. Anything that you use that you can't access, again, please prompt me and we'll get that sorted, myself and the team. One of the things that I am most excited about, and I think will be most proud of once we release the podcast, is that we are going to time point the episodes. So not a transcript, not captions on videos, but a time pointed script where if, for instance, I am doing one day, maybe I'll do a listener's Q&A. Or sometimes if I appear on someone else's podcast, I'm going to ask them for the audio of that and I will put it on my podcast. And obviously that will generate, hopefully if you think they were a great interviewer and you want to go and listen to them and so you're aware of them, you can hop over to their podcast and see who they've been interviewing, for instance, other interesting people, if I can put myself in that bracket. But what I'm going to do is I will go to the extent of time pointing every question I'm asked on every podcast. I will, on each episode that I record independently, time point. Because if you're like me, I've got out of the habit of listening to podcasts. Some of you I know love podcasts. You do cardio, you do steps, you do walking, you do long drives to work. I don't do any of those things. And so just do not feel the benefit of podcasts right now. But for me to have something time pointed where a specific question is answered that I want to know the answer to have the, 18 minutes, 32 seconds, go and listen, you get the answer, would be super helpful. So I'm going to do that. So you'll be able to search every episode in that way. I hope that's of some benefit. On something like YouTube, you'll literally be able to click the number and it'll take you there. You won't even have to navigate. So, I will also be sending out an email to my Mac mail each time I release a podcast episode. And so as is the usual fashion with podcasts, show notes, I will put the links to my Mac mail within there and links to some of the other things that I'm going to mention within there. For instance, a link to my Instagram or the Instagram post, where I think that's probably where I'm going to answer specific questions that might arise from a podcast that I'm on or a podcast I record. So you'll be able to hop over there and ask in the comments and I'll be able to get back to you. If you've got specific praise, that goes on to this next section, which I'm calling suggestions. And realistically, I'm so open to you suggesting topics for me to record on. Now, the thing I'm going to ask is if you do that, that you work with me to do it a little bit. I'll give you an example of that. But for instance, someone said to me, please can you do an episode on vitamin D? And what I would love is, and this is one of the reasons that I didn't, I thought I'm never doing a podcast again, is because when I put the pressure on myself to do an all-encompassing episode on vitamin D, because that's just how my perfectionist attitude undermines my productivity, I don't end up doing it. Whereas if I had people saying, please record on vitamin D, and 10 different people say that, and they also give me the 5 questions they would ask around vitamin D, I can then collate those and do an evergreen, a boss episode on vitamin D that will be helpful to those of you who are listening. So in the show notes, I'm going to link to a form that you can fill in, that you can literally write, this is my suggestion. You can leave contact details if you want or not, so I can contact you and ask you about that question. There will be an area where you can literally write your 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 questions on that topic, that I can then record a podcast episode dedicated to that. If you want to provide any feedback, anything like that, you can also use that form. And these forms will be hosted on my martin-macdonald.com website. And the final way you can use the podcast is to help others and or tell your story. So you can help others, I didn't actually think of this one, simply by sending them an episode if you think it's helpful. And that's what I want to do. Very often people say, what would you say in this situation? Well, if I can record you a 5 to 10 to 20 minute episode that answers a very specific question that you can just say to a friend, listen to this. It's not going to be an hour long one because no one's going to listen to that. But I'll try and be as succinct as possible. I will try and simplify the answer as much as possible, but no more than that, so that it does cover enough information to give them something to go on. Another lovely compliment that I was given when I had the Real Nutrition Radio podcast was someone I really looked up to, Dr. Lee Hamilton. He's a tricky one because he's like D. Lee Hamilton, David Lee. Anyway, it's a pain. Dr. Hamilton. And he said, he posted somewhere, or maybe left a review on iTunes or something, when I grow up, I hope to be as good of a science communicator as Martin MacDonald. And I remember that to this day, and this is 7 years ago he wrote that. And it's something that I identify with. It's something that I really like to be, and make an effort to explain things in a fashion that anyone can understand. Likewise, my whole career, or anything that's an extension of it in terms of my passions, are around helping people. Things that I know, I love educating. I know that lots of you will have stuff that you have learnt and you know, or you've done, and you're the same as me. You want to tell others because you want them to have this eureka, this aha moment, this epiphany around what might be holding them back because it was something that held you back. Some of what drives me, or drove me, at least at one point in my career, was all the misinformation I was given during my bodybuilding days. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But not wanting people to go through what I went through was a motivator for me. And it's a bit like, you become a bit evangelical. This is why you get zealots who a specific nutritional protocol works for them, and they become like a religious nut about this one thing because they don't understand the principles. Now, I want to guide this and guide people to be evidence-based and to understand these principles. But for some people, a particular method, if I can talk to them about it, for instance, aggressive deficits, I've actually got that written here, is something that I talk about a lot. And I've had so many testimonials of people messaging me and going, you've changed my life because of what you spoke about and taught with regards to aggressive deficits. And it is a unique area, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all thing, but for some people it's the key. And which is why I bring it to the evidence-based crowd of, don't only push moderate deficits. There's nothing wrong with them. They can be great for so many people, but for some, for whatever reason, and we can do some episodes on this, it'd be so fun, they don't work for some people. But I did my tour in 2019, 15 different dates, however many different continents and countries, cities, 15 different cities. And off the back of that, again, there's been some amazing testimonials of things that people have done off the back of that. A lot of my tour was talking about the mental side of dieting, the psychological side of eating and your relationship around food. And there were some quite powerful messages in there, to the point where several people went and got counselling off the back of my tour and dramatically changed their lives. And it's been so cool to hear those testimonials coming in. So and again, I'm going to say this now, if you are someone you are one of these people, even if you've already messaged me, because I don't keep track of all these names and people, just drop me a message and go, and if you're listening to this, drop me a message and say, remember this, I'd be happy to speak to you about this. You don't have to necessarily come on camera, we'll just have a chat. And it would be cool, and maybe you can inspire some others, and you can say why that thing was the game changer for you. What did that? Anything. It can be business, careers, nutrition, a change in the way you viewed yourself. Some people, it was amazing. I remember in Melbourne, a girl right after the talk, she went home and I was off at the casino. I wasn't gambling. No judgment on gambling. I was just at the casino having a drink with the attendees. Why am I over-explaining? I looked at my phone and she had recorded me this message, which was like so passionate, tears in her eyes, like, Martin, you've changed my life, this, that, and the other. And then she messaged me 18 months on, and it seems coming to that talk and something clicked and changed her life. And maybe other people need to hear what she heard in a way that maybe she can now describe better than anyone else, even me. So there are these things, aggressive diets I've written down here, eating sweets but getting off diabetes medication. Again, that's a specific testimonial. And eating, I think it was Skittles every day. And I don't know this person's details, but I feel like his name was Ryan. So Ryan, if you're out there, contact me. But I'll find you eventually. I'll come across a screenshotted message you sent me or something. People who have, regulated their menstrual cycle because of nutrition or supplementation protocols that I've talked about, I would just love to hear from you. So please look in the show notes, look for these links to my website, and just fill in the form if you would be happy to talk to me, for others to hear your story. I've actually written down here, I've just screenshotted a message that I got last week. Hi Martin, where could I read about the evolution of M&U from concept to launch? I'm still amazed at what one man has done to positively disrupt the nutrition world and leave it in a much better place. It's actually amazing. If there's somewhere to read, could it possibly be a podcast topic? And I just replied to him. That's those are such huge words. It's crazy for me anyone would say such things about me or M&U. And I just said, send me 5 to 10 questions on that, and I'd love to record this. It'd be super cool. Just to take the time, if people are interested, to take the time to, again, even just mentally processing this podcast episode with some of the background stuff. It was cool to do. Again, in terms of the career stuff, the business stuff, the practitioner stuff, someone sent me a message and I just said, this was in the last few days. it's an interesting story since I quit my 14-year career in financial services this time last year. I was a financial advisor looking after 240 high net worth clients, and my old boss wanted me to become a director. I decided to follow my passion, started M&U, then COVID hit, and had I not had the tools and support from M&U, then my business wouldn't be the success it is today, so I can't thank you enough. It's never been about the money, but I'm making more now than I was as a financial investor. And I now know she was making a fair amount of money as a financial investor. These sorts of things, these people have these epiphanies. We had one recently inside our mentoring lab. They have these amazing success stories, and so many people get this then deep desire to then tell other people what it was for them, what they applied, how they did it. And it's just an opportunity for us to learn from them and their situation. Maybe their situation is so different from yours and there'd be no point in looking at that. But maybe some of you who follow me are in lucrative careers, but you hate your job. And again, we'll be talking about some of the philosophy of happiness, but doing something that you do for so much of your life and hating it is not a way to live, no matter how much money or financial security we think that might give. So these are some of the things. If you have any of these stories specifically related to, that obviously I can interact with, there's amazing stories out there that are fantastic. I follow some super cool social media accounts that just promote good and amazing things, but obviously I'm talking about stuff related to my tour, my social media postings, anything, if I've helped you in a DM or whatever and it's made a difference, it's cool to hear. And especially if it's going to help others have something actionable. Okay, cool. I'm just going to finish with a super fast who am I? So that it just gives you an idea of what I might be able to talk with, some of my experiences. And just position things for the episodes ahead. I've written at the top here, my work and my studying overlaps a lot. I studied over a number of years. And so if it seems confusing, it probably is, because I'm not going to give you exact dates because it's not interesting. I'm just going to give you headlines. I have a degree in sports science and 2 postgraduates, one in clinical nutrition and one in sport and exercise nutrition. I did my sport and exercise nutrition masters part-time, and at the same time was lecturing, and at the same time was doing night classes to become a qualified higher education lecturer. Some of you will know it as a diploma in teaching in the lifelong learning sector. I did that and another qualification over 3 years of night classes. And the kind of sad thing in this is that during that time is actually when my dad died. And I feel like that's a hugely defining moment for me in many ways. Many of it bad. I feel like it changed me a lot as a person, and only recently do I feel like I'm fully getting back to who I was before that, so many years ago. And but in some ways there were benefits that came out of it. I did close off from the world massively, but I read and read and read and read and read and read and studied and used the internet for what the internet is great for, just consuming an enormous amount of information. And I feel like it did make me somewhat of the practitioner I am today, and the level of knowledge I had or have. It's one of those things. Over the years, you end up forgetting some of what you knew, and it's annoying. But also during that time, I competed in natural bodybuilding, as I mentioned earlier, and ended up doing that for 5 years. And loved the physical endeavor. I've always loved training. I've always loved exercise. I snapped my ACL playing, completely ruptured. I'm completely ACL deficient in my left leg. And And that's a whole nother story about how I was given bad advice not to have it repaired, etc., which I'm to this day still sad about. Maybe I'll get it repaired, who knows. But again, that happening led to me training a lot more, got me into the gym a lot more, and ended up competing obviously in my first natural bodybuilding show. And I'm genetically, I'm not good as a competitive bodybuilder. My body shape is all wrong in a very, judgmental, subjective sport. Anyway, I won't go into that. If you're not interested in bodybuilding, it's not interesting. But it was amazing to see how nutrition and training was able to change my body and how I felt. And I learned so much through that process. Again, going way back, got my first weight set when I was 12. I've spoken about this on social media again. I saved up money for a long time to be able to afford the extortionate Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopaedia to bodybuilding. It's funny, as this was me as a kid. I was obsessed with muscles and the origins and insertions of those muscles and just their amazingness. There was something that I was just in awe of and learning about them and how the body functioned. And then I started to get interested in health and then fitness and all this kind of jazz. So sometimes when people kind of see me posting my funny tricep photos, again, they're like, oh, it can seem something that it's not. I'm interested in training for many other reasons other than the way it makes you look. And also this idea that I think my triceps must be amazing, when I'm very, very aware that in the grand scheme of the world of bodybuilding, they are nothing special. It's just the fact that they're inordinately good for someone who trains so badly with so little, with so much lackluster. That's changing though in 2021. Anyway, I'll move on. It led me to this career or this period of learning so much about myself, physiology, nutrition, all of this jazz. Work-wise, again, going all the way back, I started working when I was 15. Illegally. Bad, isn't it? I worked in pharmacies for 5 years. And again, a very interesting time. A lot of learning happened whilst working in pharmacies. And I stacked shelves in Asda. I was then a minimum wage gym instructor, give or take minimum wage, for the next 12 years, I think, give or take. And so if you put the timeline on this, I was a very successful, not in the grand scheme of things, but just I was a successful, businessman. I had a successful, thriving, world-known nutrition consultancy whilst I was still a minimum wage, essentially glorified cleaner, not a personal trainer even, level 2 gym instructor we're talking here. I was also lecturing at the highest level. I was on TV working with celebrities whilst also a gym instructor. I don't know why I kept it on for so long. It was just a nice thing. I had friends who worked there. I was not arrogant enough to think I was above wiping benches and putting people's weights away. It was nice. It was a cool atmosphere. It didn't really feel like work. Again, the reason I point that out is just an interesting insight into potentially how some people view me or how people tend to view other people on the internet, what they see. And what they don't see sometimes is very telling. So I did that. As I said, I was lecturing students who sometimes were a lot older than me, mature students. If they were athletes, I delivered my first ever lecture to final year degree students at the age of 21. And some of those students were much, much older. And they would then see me in the gym putting their weights away. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's humbling in a good way. I haven't actually written this anywhere on the slides. I also, most of my life, volunteered in creches. I love babies. I always have, from being a tiny young boy. My mum was a very over familiar human, I guess, back in that day. it was normal, but we would literally be talking to people, maybe at like a mums and toddlers thing or something, and she would just go, can my son hold your baby? And I was like super awkward, but at the same time deep down was like, yes, I love babies, and so I'll just hold babies. And then all through my life I just got a name for myself in friendship groups, that if someone had a baby and it was crying, they would just give it to me, and for whatever reason it would always calm down, go to sleep. It was like my gift, and I just love babies, and I did that until Ollie was born. I haven't written that in here. I completely forgot it. But again, I guess it just shows you where some of the parenting stuff comes from. I was an extremely confident first-time parent. And I also had gone on a course that had paradigm flipped how I thought I was going to parent my children, and which has succeeded to a huge extent to this day. It's, some people go, oh, how do you feed your nutrition? And it's so much, feed your children. It's so much more than just that in terms of the parenting stuff that I want to talk about eventually. Anyway, where was I? I lectured at universities for a long time, many, many years. I was the BSc lead for the BSc Nutrition at one institution. I then went on and wrote the entire nutrition program for another institution. And then that went so well that they then wrote another year's worth of content because the students wanted it so much, moving up in their studies. I've guest lectured at several universities. I love lecturing. I love public speaking. It, without a doubt, is one of my passions, that there is nothing more that fills my cup as much. Being on stage, educating and entertaining. I just love it. I feel super blessed. I still have a screenshot of when I first said, one day I hope to be able to make a living public speaking. And obviously when I did my tour, there was nothing from a business perspective. I didn't need to make a living from doing that. I make my living from running a business or a few businesses. So I wasn't even having to do it as a living. I was just fortunate enough to be able to travel the world speaking and have thousands of people come hear me speak. It was, a lifetime highlight, career highlight doing that, and something that I wish to carry on doing more. Another little interlude I just threw at the bottom here. Excel Labs was my supplement company. I don't know the exact years, but it was like 2007. For those of you on audio only, I've just hit over a picture frame. If you do just listen to me on audio versions, you should just go look at my little setup. It'll probably progress over time. But yeah, I had a supplement company. It was supposed to be the world's first purely evidence-based supplement company. We were the first ever company to have a batch tested, because I was specifically in the performance nutrition, athletes world at the time. Batch tested standalone beta-alanine supplement. And lots of the top Olympic athletes at the time, because we were based in Loughborough, were using that. There was other products as well, but I sadly don't have any left. This was actually Mac Omega-3, Omega-3 fish oils. There's my little face on the tub. Anyway, someone asked me just recently, do you think there's space for a truly evidence-based supplement company? And I said, you know what? It would be a soul-destroying failure. Because maybe we can talk about that in another episode, but people want to be sold a lie. People want magic bullets, and you can buy the things that work very cheaply, very easily. You'd have to be some kind of marketing whiz. I just think you'd have to lack some integrity to make it work. Someone might manage, I don't know. Finally, I started Mac-Nutrition in 2008, almost 13 years ago now. And it was my nutrition consultancy. It was me working as a performance nutritionist, self-employed, working with individuals, working with governing bodies, sporting governing bodies at the time, and helping individual athletes, I was the head of the England Swimming Nutrition Program. So I wrote all of the content that was delivered nationwide on that program. Some of the world record holders to this day studied nutrition that I wrote, these are just nice things. I very much doubt I played. But even if I played 0.0001% in their success, I'm happy. England Athletics, the education program, I was the area lead for that. I was at Derby County Football Club for 5 seasons. That's for those of you who are worldwide, professional football team, soccer. And again, I learnt a lot from those situations. I saw some really interesting things, and I learnt a lot from those situations. And maybe I'll tell you some stories about that in future episodes. And then one of the things I'm probably most proud of is my work with British Weightlifting. I started working with British Weightlifting as the head nutritionist, only nutritionist, I think in around 2008, 2009. And probably 2009. And 2008, because it was I think it was that Beijing. They had just finished Beijing. And then I worked with them towards London 2012 and 2016 Olympic Games in Rio. And I did, the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow and multiple World Championships. And it was such an interesting time for me as a practitioner, nutritionist, working with these amazing athletes. And I feel like I should name some of them, and then it just seems unfair to others. But lots of you will know Sonny Webster. It was an absolute privilege to work with him from, I think he was 14 when we first worked together. And to kind of know him, like he's obviously a super megastar now. And just everything that he's achieved today is, I could have told you it was going to happen then. Not necessarily in the way it happened. Obviously, he's gone through some hardships where he was treated unfairly, but everything that was in him then is him now. It's super cool to see that. Zoe Smith, obviously, amazing athlete, super interesting working with her over so many years. Again, she was a similar age, 14, when we started working together, and worked with her again on some really cool projects into different weight classes and those kind of things. And this actually leads into what I'm going to talk about a bit. Ali Jawad, world record holder, I believe, at one time, Paralympic powerlifting. Just super cool stuff that I feel so privileged to have been part of. And that kind of led to one of the things that we did, which is jumping ahead a little bit, but we wrote, over this time, my self-employment became, I was putting out some content, and online, I wasn't a highly invested social media presence, but I had a website and I had a Facebook page, and I started to use Twitter, and then I moved on to LinkedIn before it was cool. You can find thousands probably of posts, comments, in these quacky nutrition groups when I was trying to teach people what evidence-based nutrition was, wasting my time for no gain. It's called passion. But we grew, and I started to employ people, and so Sarah Duffield, my kind of head of nutrition, essentially the MD of MNU, Mac-Nutrition Collective, we wrote this weight making workshop. And the claim to fame of that is some of Conor McGregor's team came on that weight making workshop. And before one of his big title wins, I think it was the big one. I'm not a big follower of the UFC. But then they came back and said to me, I didn't know who they were at the time. They were just sat there. And in all their Irishness glory. And they came to another talk later on. I think it was on to our mentorship, which I'll talk about. And it was only on the mentorship I found out that they were who they were, and they told me all about how they had implemented what we said, and it was super interesting. Sadly, I got no glory from it, but whatever. But through working at Mac-Nutrition, through having such a passion for nutrition, I ended up working with some celebrities. My name was mentioned on TV, and really that skyrocketed our consultancy. We started doing big corporate nutrition gigs, lots of high-end individual nutrition clients, and again, all the time putting out bits and bobs on social media, and my reputation grew. And I was not free of controversy. I was very well hated in the dietetics circles because I was calling out some of their, ties that they've now dropped, which is good to see. I mean, I don't know what's there right now, but some big ties with, big sugar. And it's funny because we've got the zealots now who are saying us that sugar's toxic, and we're kind of trying to balance that discussion. But back in the day, these dietetics associations, I still have somewhere their fact sheet on sugar before, whilst they were literally funded by the Sugar Bureau, and then now, and the day that funding stopped. And I do give myself credit for putting so much pressure. I was hated in the dietetics world. Maybe I'll do a whole episode on that, on the backlash and the hate and the, I'm kind of glad for it, because it's kind of given me the thicker skin that I have today for the way the industry is, the rumors, the gossips, the haters. Even someone who hasn't risen to fame quickly, 2008, you just get hate for having a name and putting your head above the parapet. But yeah, the extent that these big associations, national associations were just basically targeted on me, little old me. I was a nobody, really. I still am a nobody. So it was funny. So yeah, I give myself some credit for changing some of those things, and the way that they were so anti-fat. And now we're in this paradigm shift of people going towards, being anti-carb. It's amazing to have been around long enough to see these shifts in how these dietetics associations and everyone else is acting. So yeah, my reputation grew. I was outspoken, sometimes too much. I've said this elsewhere on other podcasts. There was a time where I was fueled by bitterness, anger, personal sadness, and it wasn't a good time. What I was doing was maybe okay, it was legitimate, but it was fueled for the wrong reasons, and there was a lot of negativity in me, and but it did a lot of good. If I can see my footprints, my stamps of where the industry has changed because of me, and I feel super proud. And I know that probably how that sounds to some of you is a bit like, oh, look at you. I don't think I'm better than anyone else. I just have done these things for a long time. And if I didn't, then that's fine. I know I did. So, last little bit. In about 2013, we had this idea for a mentorship. And this is bringing us up to present day, and I'm about to finish. We had this idea of doing a mentorship. I felt I'd had a small amount of success, and I'd taught myself search engine optimization, marketing. I had created a consultancy. I'd created packages. I'd all from scratch with no mentoring, all myself. Sounds like that Snoop Dogg speech. I'd like to thank me for working, having no days off. I'd like to thank me for being me. So sorry for that, but it is a little bit of that. But essentially, wanted to help, wanted to teach, and actually it was specific to more nutrition graduates and sports science graduates who wouldn't have been given any of this stuff that I now knew. And so, it's like the original mentorship in a way. So many more people have started doing it. And it's funny because multiple creators of courses, diplomas, institutes who now offer nutrition qualifications, came on my mentorship in 2014, 15, 16. One of my kind of proudest, one of my proudest claims to fame / one of my best friends in the nutrition industry, Danny Lennon, was an attendee on the first ever Mac-Nutrition Mentorship. And he is an absolute superstar now. I want to give him credit for podcasts. If you don't know him and you are listening to this, please. It is slightly higher level nutrition, but he is the most amazing interviewer. Partly because he's so knowledgeable on nutrition, but he's also so humble that he lets experts speak, but asks such amazing questions that give such insight into these incredibly complex areas. And he is someone I would call a true friend, and I'm so privileged that he came on that first ever mentorship, and he said such nice things about how he was already super knowledgeable, but how it just changed some of his thinking. I think I quote him quite often saying it changed his learning gradient, in that he was just able. There's some cool sayings about people being able to hear something, being able to entertain a fact or a piece of information, but not just accept it as gold. And he said it just gave him a way of thinking, and it's so cool to have played my little puzzle piece within his amazing journey to stardom. And he will not like me saying stardom because he's so humble. You can say stardom about me and I will fully accept it, not Danny. But yeah, if there's any other podcast in the world, he's the GOAT of nutrition podcasts. If you're not aware of what GOAT is, like I wasn't, someone called me the GOAT of nutrition, and I was like, oh, what does that mean? And they were like, oh, it's an acronym. And I was like, oh, is it God of all things nutrition? And they were like, no, it's not actually. And I was like, oh, awkward. Greatest of all time. I didn't know that. Funny, huh? Anyway, both kind of mean the same thing, let's be honest. It's a huge compliment, which is not in any way true, but it's nice. It's just kind of a fun way of giving someone a compliment. But he's the GOAT. He truly is the GOAT of, if you type nutrition into Spotify, he's the man. He's there. Anyway, so our mentorship, it was a huge success. Some of the biggest names in the industry came and learnt. And the thing that came out of it, which you cannot sell, and when we jump forward to MNU, you cannot sell. Well, it's kind of like going, I can't say this without sounding incredibly conceited, but for some reason, the way I teach, the way I think, the way I help others to look at information, it makes them better critical thinkers. It makes them more confident in their knowledge because they truly understand. They see things in a different way. I don't know the formula. I can't teach someone else to do that, because I don't know how I do it. But time and time again, since, for 6 years, constantly teaching hundreds and hundreds and thousands of professionals, I seemingly do that. And I'm so, so happy that I can. I love it. I enjoy teaching so much. And I'm hoping that I can bring some of that to this podcast to teach maybe a more general population on different things, trying to be evidence-based in whatever I talk about. In terms of philosophy, there isn't a lot of evidence necessarily, but when we move forward to something like gratitude, which lots of philosophers talk about, gratitude being this key, this cornerstone to contentment and happiness, we have meta-analyses, we have randomized control trials of people practicing gratitude and it having statistically significant results. So I hope this has given you a really good insight into what the podcast is going to be like. Fast forward, we did years and years of these mentorships, several of them every year. And out of that, the feedback was constantly, Martin and team, please create something that is longer, that is just everything you know, put it in a course. And then M&U was born. M&U was this, our mentorship was an intensive 2-day weekend. And realistically, the mentorship weekend has become our Mac-Nutrition Mentoring Lab, which is this professional development platform teaching business skills, soft skills, advanced nutrition. It's a community. We support each other. It's one of the nicest places on Facebook in terms of discussion about some topics that can really rile people up. And it runs alongside M&U. It was realistically an afterthought of M&U because I got such worry that I wanted to deliver something that was perfect with M&U, that if I forgot anything, the mentoring lab was that. If there were any holes to be filled, that M&U hadn't given people exactly what they needed to be successful and confident and practice with integrity, the mentoring lab was gonna fill that void. And it's become this huge entity in and of itself, a business that is completely separate from M&U. M&U was supposed to be a little YouTube course. I posted online that we were going to write something and it just went crazy. The industry, and I feel, I'm going to say this on record, I feel so blessed, so privileged that it was me that the universe chose, that just for whatever reason, a completely evidence-based nutrition course hadn't been done yet, and that I was in this position where I had a framework, a structure, a team, a business, where I was able to do it properly. And all that M&U has now afforded me, the people I've been able to meet, the financial security, it's never, ever been about the money for me. But what it's now given me is this financial security and this ability to go, I can completely run a business 100% ethically and help others. We can do stuff for charity. We can create experiences for people without worrying about profit margins. We can do passion projects where we just have zero, there's not even 1 cent on the table or 1% of interest in how that is functional as a business model that we can just do right in the world. I feel so grateful that for whatever reason, I was there at the right time in the right place with the right infrastructure, that M&U and that the industry needed it so much. There were brilliant nutritionists out there, super well known, great followings, but they maybe didn't necessarily have the infrastructure, the team around them, the fact that we are so pastoral in what we do, the support. So that's M&U. The industry wanted it. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Is this going to be the best thing ever, etc., etc.? And I was like, oh no. It's not going to be that. Stop saying that. And as the story goes, I worked with my last ever client. I can maybe talk about that separately. I've talked about that on the podcast elsewhere. And I didn't want to work with him as a client. He was a referral. He said, charge me as much as you want. I want to do this, essentially. And I said, I want to close my consultancy for 6 months and write a nutrition course, and wrote that figure down on a check, on an invoice or whatever. And he paid it into my account within an hour. And we closed our consultancy and we wrote M&U. And during that time, we wanted an expression of interest. We started investing in these, academic grade platforms. It's still a discussion to this day of how many tens of thousands of pounds we spend on our education platforms, because we're using stuff that the biggest universities across the world use, despite the fact that we're this tiny little nutrition course. But we put out an expression of interest, and we filled 3 intakes full, an intake 3 times over, with expressions of interest, of payment, down payments, which gave us the funds to then make it what it was. To do it really, really, really freaking well. And I gave my heart and soul to MNU my whole life. I lost lots of friends, relationships to it. I think I would do things differently again if maybe I had the chance. But it's one of those things that many business owners will know. When it just goes, there's no stopping it. And maybe it just would have failed had I not just given it that much of myself. My babies, Orly and Arlo, were born during this time, and Arlo was born in the midst of MNU. Orly was born just before it. I was fortunate enough to be not too overworked with Orly, and I was, super glad to spend every single day of the first 2 years of her life with her. I don't think I had a day away from her. And with Arlo, it was a different story. And again, lessons to be learned there, life lessons, regrets to reflect on and not let them happen again. And things that I want to pass forward to people, hopefully through things like this podcast, because lots of things I just wish I had been told by someone else, by someone I respected. And that's who I am. I now have martinmacdonald.com. I don't know what that's going to be. It's where I kind of host general information. I have my Mac mail there, which is my email newsletter. I don't market much. I don't email much. But I hope this podcast can serve the world. One key thing for me within my career was when I truly defined what success was for me. Success can take many forms. And when I defined it, I was asked to deliver a lecture on success. And being successful whilst maintaining integrity. And it was such a cool thing to deliver. And I remember defining success for me as essentially helping the world and helping the people in it and leaving a legacy, a lasting impact on people in this world. And I truly feel like I'm doing that now, which again is just another reason that I feel so blessed and want to give back so much. And this podcast is an extension of that. So I don't know how long I've been talking. I hope that's been insightful for you and maybe of some interest and whets your appetite, makes you moist for future episodes. We'll have to do like an innuendo bingo competition one day or something. Cool. Thanks very much for listening to me ramble on. As I said, you'll be able to look at stuff in the show notes. The more I get an idea of how this is going to run, the more I can direct you and the places to go. But always just look in the show notes for various things. Please fire in any testimonials, any suggestions for show topics. I will look forward to seeing those. And for now, I will say goodbye until next time. Thank you very much.